Hey, everybody. Welcome to Representative Gary Palmer and TrumpCare, or How I Learned to Keep Worrying and Watch My Back. I made this video after our experiences with Gary at his town halls this week. I just feel like, with the changes that are happening to the healthcare proposals, Gary kind of came at us with some talking points that threw us off balance a little bit. So I wanted to do some research, see if I could find out what's happening, what it is he's talking about. And I think I've made some progress. I just wanted to share this with everybody. It's a little bit long and it's kind of complicated, but it really exposes what they're trying to do, and it's not pretty. So if you guys will hang in, I think it'll be worth the wait. So I'm presenting it as a timeline of TrumpCare, or the American Health Care Act, or House Resolution 1628. It was originally introduced and it got referred to the House Budget Committee. So I thought, hey, Gary Palmer's on that committee. I wonder what he's going to think about this thing. It came up in the House Budget Committee on Thursday, March 16th, and they called for a vote, and lo and behold, Representative Gary Palmer was a nay. So I thought, well, hey, this is awesome. Gary may be a good guy after all. He stood there and kind of hung in there with us on February 25th and told us that he believed in taking it slow and getting it right. So good for him. He may be not such a bad guy after all. Unfortunately, that didn't last very long. The very next day, March 17th, President Trump called Alabama congressmen to the Oval Office. We can see Gary sitting here with President Trump, and being the deal maker that he is, President Trump talked him into supporting the bill. He said that they made a number of concessions that he believed would improve the bill and that justified his support. So Gary's now a yes. It's Friday, March 17th. Gary's a yes. We move forward till Wednesday of the next week. We're now in the House Rules Committee, and our very own Gary Palmer proposes an amendment to TrumpCare that has to do with federal invisible high-risk pools. What these are, this is what Gary's talking about when he talks about the Maine solution. This is what it's kind of a version of what they did in the state of Maine. What it allows insurance companies to do is to separate people, basically separate sick people into a separate pool. And once the sick people are out of the big pool, they're able to offer lower premiums to the people in the main pool. The thing about it is that you have to decide who goes into the high-risk pool, and how do you do that? Well, you do that by checking to see what sort of pre-existing conditions they might have. Do they have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or endometrial cancer, or metastatic cancer, or prostate cancer, congestive heart failure, renal failure, rheumatoid arthritis, HIV, or conveniently any other health condition that the secretary may determine. Basically, what this does is it separates these people. It does a couple of things, though, that Gary doesn't talk about much. The first thing it does is it allows the insurance companies actually to charge the sick people more than they are currently allowed to charge. And the other thing is that it depends on government subsidies to reimburse the insurance companies for the increased cost of these high-risk patients. So anyway, Gary gets his amendment introduced. He's all prepared to vote yes, and then we move forward to Friday, March 24th, which, as we know, is the day that things kind of fell apart for the Republicans. they weren't able to get the votes to pass this thing. President Trump had said that they needed to vote for it, yes or no anyway, but at the last minute, Paul Ryan realized he didn't have the votes, and so he pulled the bill. On that same day, Gary issues a press release on his website, strangely claiming that he believes pulling the bill from the House floor was the right call. I say that's strange because if you're supporting the bill, why do you think it's a good thing to pull it from the floor? This seems a little bit like revisionist history on Gary Palmer's part. I think he likes to appear as if he always knows what's going on. So he knew that this needed some more work. So why did it fail for the first time? I think in a nutshell it comes down to it wasn't moderate enough for the moderate Republicans of the Tuesday group, and it wasn't conservative enough for the conservatives in the Freedom Caucus, like Gary Palmer. So this was a big deal. This was a big loss for Republicans. This was a big loss for the president. They've been running on this repeal and replace stuff for a long time, and they basically fell flat on their faces. I think everybody kind of hoped, or I know I did, that they were just going to let well enough alone and kind of move on, but that's not what's happening. They are bringing this back, and we have not heard the last of this. So starting on Monday, April 3rd, President Donald Trump's administration had meetings with two key groups of Republicans whose split over health care policy caused GOP leaders to pull a plan last month to repeal and replace Obamacare. After that meeting, Chairman Mark Meadows of the House Freedom Caucus said that his group was intrigued by ideas that the White House floated. Earlier that same day, the House members who were part of the moderate Tuesday group met at the White House, also to discuss changes to the health care bill. And present at that meeting was Tom MacArthur, who is sort of the leader of the Tuesday group. So they're back on this. They're pushing. Those meetings at the White House were held with Mike Pence, and they're not letting this thing go. They're still working on it. Go forward a couple of days, Thursday, April 6th, we're back in the Rules Committee now, and we have another amendment that's being offered to TrumpCare. This is being offered by Representative Gary Palmer and Representative Schweitz. I think his name is Swigert, maybe. I may have that wrong, but the representative from Arizona. Anyway, they're offering another amendment that has to do with federal invisible risk-sharing programs. And they talk about this program as a means to provide payments to health insurance issuers. The trick is, where does the money come from? So for the purposes of providing funding for the program, they appropriate $15 billion for a 9-year period starting January 1st, 2018. So $15 billion for 9 years, no mention of how we're supposed to fund subsidies after that 9 years. And also in this amendment, they take a lot of the teeth out of Gary's original amendment. What this does is it just sort of leaves all of the details about how the federal invisible high-risk pool is actually going to work. Like, they just leave those details to be figured out later. So they just say that we're going to have this thing and we're going to put $15 billion for a 9-year period. So that's an interesting number because as we know, Gary doesn't like the numbers that come from the CBO. He thinks the CBO is full of crap. Probably because the CBO gave such a horrific score to the TrumpCare bill in terms of the number of people who lost insurance. Just across the board, it was a disaster. So Gary has stated at his town halls that he prefers the analysis by Milliman. So I got a copy of this white paper by Milliman, which was released on April 7th of this year, and it talks about the federal invisible high-risk pools. And the question is, how much money does Milliman think that this is going to cost? Well, it's interesting. Their estimates fall into a range. The low end of that range is $5.4 billion per year, and the high end of that range is $9.9 billion per year. So they've appropriated $15 billion as a one-time appropriation to cover 9 years, when the actual estimates of the cost are between $5.4 and $9.9 billion every year. So this is a scam. It's a farce. The money's not there. They're making no means to pay for the reduction in premiums that are supposed to be subsidized by the government. Well, 1 week later, here comes the MacArthur Amendment. Again, Representative Tom MacArthur is the leader of the more moderate Republican group, the Tuesday group. So he introduces his amendment, and while I couldn't find the exact text of that amendment, in fact, I don't think it's been released, CNBC had a copy of this document, which they claim to be the MacArthur Amendment. This was released on April 13th, and I also believe this is the piece of paper that Gary Palmer was reading to us from at his town halls. So on its face, the MacArthur Amendment sounds like a good thing. What does it do? It reinstates essential health benefits as the federal standard, and it maintains the following provisions of the AHCA. You can't deny coverage due to pre-existing medical conditions. You can't discriminate based on gender. It guarantees issuance of coverage to all applicants, guarantees renewability of coverage, coverage of dependents on parents' plans up to age 26. It keeps community rating rules, except for limited waivers. Limited waivers. So there is, under this amendment, a limited waiver option that would allow states to seek limited waivers for essential health benefits. It claims that community rating rules are not waivable, including health status, i.e. pre-existing conditions, unless the state has established or is participating in a high-risk pool. Interesting. So what they're saying is that states could receive waivers for essential health benefits and pre-existing condition protections. And how would they receive those waivers? Well, in order to receive a waiver, the state must attest that the purpose of their requested waiver is to reduce premium costs. Note that language. They don't have to show that what they're doing would reduce premium costs. They merely have to attest that the purpose of their waiver is to reduce premium costs. So this is a sham too. What do these new amendments do? Well, it sounds great. They lower premium costs through government subsidies paid to insurers. That's what Gary Palmer means when he says they're backed by the federal government. And they also keep the essential benefits and pre-existing condition protections, except for the fact that they provide no funding for the required government subsidies, and they provide easy ways for states to receive waivers for both the essential health benefits and the pre-existing condition protections. This is a bait and switch. What these amendments really do is they provide political cover for both the moderates of the Tuesday group and the conservatives of the Freedom Caucus by letting them both claim to have gotten what they demanded. But the real winners are the insurance companies, and of course, we are the real losers. Now, 3 days later, April 16th, it's payback time. pro-Trump group launches a $3 million ad campaign to prop up House allies. Among the recipients of that support are Gary Palmer of Alabama and David Schweikert of Arizona. This is what they get for being good little soldiers and doing what Trump and Pence tell them to do and getting back to work and hammering out a deal so that both they and the Freedom, not they in the Freedom Caucus and the more moderate Tuesday group can both claim to have gotten what they demanded so that they can then vote for TrumpCare. So the next day on the calendar is Wednesday, April 26th. This is their first day back from the current congressional recess. It also happens to be the day that they plan to vote on TrumpCare. This is a big deal. We need to call Gary Palmer and demand legitimate answers to our legitimate concerns. We also need to demand to see this bill before it's voted on. I had a conversation with his district director, Ray Mellick, on Friday, and he assured me that we would be able to see the bill before it's voted on. He, I guess, just forgot to tell me when that would happen or how that would happen, where I could find the bill. We also need to demand to get a CBO score of the new bill before it's voted on. This thing is a boondoggle. It is worse than the original bill, but it scares me because what it does is provide political cover for both of these groups to potentially give them an opportunity to heal the rift within the Republican Party and to cram this thing down our throats. So let's get busy on this. This is unacceptable. This is backroom politics. Gary Palmer stood in front of us on February 25th in Hoover and told us that he believed in taking it slow and getting it right with regards to health care. This does neither of those things, and I frankly have lost a great deal of respect for Representative Palmer through the research that I've done. This is cynical, and this is opportunistic, and it's dishonest. And I think we should call him and let him know in no uncertain terms that if he insists on forcing this thing through, that he will be held accountable and that there will be a day of reckoning. So thank you guys for hanging in with me. I know it's been a lot of information, but let's give him a call and let him know that this is not going to fly. Thank y'all. Talk to you soon.